Russell Wilson or Pete Carroll? That is the question. Which side are you on? The franchise quarterback or the Seahawks organization? Their foundation of a culture with Pete Carroll or the Super Bowl winner? One of the elite players in this league and one of the biggest stars of the NFL. What we see with Russell Wilson right now is a real interesting case. Is such a fascinating person right now. Not even player. We know what Russell Wilson is as a player. Russell Wilson as a player is a top 5, top 6 quarterback in the NFL. He's been a top 5 quarterback for the past 3 or 4 seasons. And he's probably a Hall of Famer at the end of the day. You would think that a guy that has never had a bad season in the league from a team success perspective would not be this disgruntled, would not be this upset, would not feel that he is being undermanned or underappreciated. Overall, feeling like he doesn't have enough power in this relationship. I have never seen a player that has been this successful with a franchise with very limited bumps in the road that wants to be traded. So when I think about this situation, I think about where Russell Wilson was as a 2012 rookie sensation, moving up throughout his career, getting more fame, building a bigger name, becoming a greater superstar, becoming a better player. And with all of that, of course, builds the ego up a little bit on and off the field. And I really feel like Russell Wilson of 5 years ago wouldn't be asking to be traded, even if he would have gone through the bumps in the road that maybe a Deshaun Watson would have. I think the way that the NFL has shifted in philosophy, that players are more open and it's more accepted that they can ask for a trade, is one thing. I think there's entirely another conversation that we need to be having here, which is that maybe Russell Wilson is getting a little bit too high on himself. Maybe his ego has gotten the best of him right now. Because even though, guys, I've never been a huge Pete Carroll guy, and I even question at the end of the year if Pete Carroll should have been fired. Despite the success that Pete Carroll has given this franchise, feels like this team has stayed rather stagnant since about 2015, where they've been a pretty good team, but not necessarily a contender or a great team, despite trying to make moves and having an elite quarterback and being in the realm of possibility to get to the Super Bowl, but never actually feeling like a legitimate threat to do so. A lot of that, I feel, falls on the limitations of Pete Carroll and his growing philosophy of old school football. The guy has stuck with a very similar scheme on defense. Now, this year we saw some things develop where he changed it a little bit more, and he's been doing so since about 2016, trying to find ways to change and implement new philosophy to that defense where we knew cover 3, press, bail, that's the Seattle scheme. Everybody copied it. Seattle's been trying to get away from it as of late. That was his bread and butter. When the Seahawks were at their best, their bread and butter wasn't necessarily the coaching or even the scheme that was kind of revolutionary in 2012 and 2013 and 2014 at that time, which thus, just like the Tampa 2, made everyone else kind of copy them, right? Now that's outdated. Now that's not successful. Now you need all-star casts everywhere on defense to pull that off at an elite level because offenses have seen it. They know how to beat it. They know how to defeat it, just like any other defense. As time wears on, you can pick something apart. Pete Carroll, his great philosophy, his great scheme advantage was always that. But it was more about the talent that they were able to find. When Pete Carroll came into the NFL, he had a stretch of amazing drafts because he knew the college prospect game. He knew the guys coming out of the draft. He knew the underrated corners like Richard Sherman. He knew a guy like Russell Wilson. He knew these names in the 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013 drafts where he was able to pick a bunch of bargain players and be able to put them and implement them into this scheme. And he understood the type of players that it would take to get this team to where he wanted to go. And those teams of 2013 and 2014 have not really been matched for Seattle. They were two of the most talented and successful teams back-to-back that we've ever seen in the history of the NFL. But Pete Carroll, that growing philosophy of old school ground and pound, toughness, physicality, and energy has kind of worn thin. And that's what you need to be afraid of if you're a Pete Carroll supporter. Because I really felt like this eventually would happen with Pete Carroll, where Pete Carroll, he's a rah-rah coach, right? There's only so many times that you can hear the same speech, that you can really go through the same meeting or hear an old story from Pete Carroll, if you've been there for a long time. Pete Carroll is one of those guys that gets the best out of a team for 2 to 3 years. That's why he was a great college coach. And he's a very good NFL coach, and he's sustained a lot of success. I think the best thing he's done is really culture and been able to maintain that. But I think he's been very fortunate that he's had a Russell Wilson to be able to adapt to that culture, similarly to how Tom Brady did for Bill Belichick, to allow him to get away with that. And then Russell Wilson bailed him out a lot of times in some of these years where the team wasn't as good on defense or not as talented around him. It allowed the team to be still a playoff contender. So I understand Russell Wilson's anger, his frustration, where he's coming from with, we should have won another Super Bowl. Like, we should have at least played in one. We should be one of the teams that's more creative, one of these teams that's moving football forward, not backwards. I think Russell Wilson hears all those things and is seeing what Tom Brady's doing and what Aaron Rodgers has done and what, Patrick Mahomes has done with Andy Reid. And he's like, why can't I have an Andy Reid? Why can't I be like Brady and pick my team and go somewhere and win that I really feel good about? And I totally get that. And I understand the want to win and the drive and the passion to succeed and be great. At the same time, though, there's always the argument of the grass ain't greener on the other side, Like, how many franchises are more stable and better than Seattle? Like, what, 3, 4, 5? Like, it's a short list. There are not a lot, especially when you look at the list that he provided us, right? The Raiders? No. I mean, maybe you get a better offensive mind with John Gruden, but besides that, you don't get a lot better in terms of Seattle's stability. Chicago? Oh my goodness, no way are they close to the level of Seattle from an organizational perspective. Dallas, of course, has been up and down, and New Orleans is fantastic. I don't even know how that worked because of the Saints cap situation, and I'd understand why Wilson would pick them over Seattle, but I just find that hard to believe. I think Russell Wilson has a lot of fair arguments, but I've also seen the trend of Russell Wilson just becoming more and more unlikable from my perspective. I always kind of liked Russell Wilson because he was the very, oh shucks guy, But I feel like we've been seeing the true colors of Russell Wilson a lot more recently. And I hate to say it, but ever since he kind of married Sierra, he's been a different guy. It's almost like he's been forced out of his shell in some good ways, but in other bad ways, where we had those stories of Richard Sherman talking about Wilson and the team in general, talking about Wilson, Michael Bennett and these guys, just talking about how he didn't really feel a part of the team. He was almost external to it. He was almost an outside voice to it. He didn't fit in with the boys, so to speak. I always do question that a little bit. Those things do linger in my mind. But for me, Russell Wilson has just been a different character. He hasn't been that same guy since the whole Sierra fame thing with the power couple. I think a little bit of that and the want to be great combined with this ambition of the power couple celebrity has forced him into a spot where he feels that he should be going to a higher profile location, market, city. He should be getting what he wants because he believes he is this great. He believes he's this superstar. And again, Russell Wilson's amazing, but like grass isn't greener on the other side, bro. Like sometimes it's just not. And you got to wonder if it is better. Like, how many other teams are going to have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett? How many other teams are going to be able to support you the way that this general manager and this organization has by trying to trade for Jamal Adams or picking up a Carlos Dunlap, right? Having a Bobby Wagner on the other side of the ball to lean on for leadership. I feel like Russell Wilson could go elsewhere and be very successful if he's put in an offense where he can let himself cook, where Russ can cook. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of the arguments made for Russell Wilson are straw man arguments. Like he gets sacked a lot. I don't see Russell Wilson getting sacked a lot to be a reason why Russell Wilson should be angry at Seattle. Because to be honest, if you watch Russell Wilson, like actually physically sit down and watch Russell Wilson week to week, any logical fan would tell you that a lot of those sacks are because of Russell Wilson. Like Russell Wilson makes a lot of plays, especially on the run, but that also leads to a lot of sacks. So I feel like blaming it just on the offensive line talent or just on the offensive line is a bit of an issue here. And it's not correct. It's not true. I think there's 50-50 proposition here. I feel like I understand where Pete Carroll's coming from, where he's had all this success doing the same philosophy, doing the same thing, being the same thing. And yes, his inability to evolve has been very, very frustrating from an outside perspective and probably from a Seahawks fan perspective. But really, is Russ being a true passing guy? Just this offense running through Russ, all of that, this defense being hung out to dry essentially. Is that the way for this team to win? We saw early in the year where Russ was cooking and it was incredible. He was playing at an MVP level, but the defense was playing awful. And I felt like a lot of that had to do with the lack of balance, the lack of actual organization. I feel that Russ should have more control in Seattle, and I don't know how much control he has. I don't know how he is inside the building. I don't know Russell Wilson. I don't know Pete Carroll, and I don't know the way they think and the way that they're preparing for these games. So I would love to see a top offensive coordinator get his hands on Russell Wilson. But at the same time, we've never really seen Russell Wilson thrive in that scenario because we've never really been given it. So Russell Wilson at a stage where he has a couple years left of his prime. I don't see Russell Wilson extending this prime past 35 years old. He doesn't feel like a quarterback to me because he's smaller, because he's built on mobility. I feel like he will hit the cliff sooner than other great quarterbacks have. And I just feel like that's because of the way he's made and the way his makeup is. It's such a dilemma. I just wanted to voice this. I wanted to go through this. I wanted to talk it out. Because Russell Wilson is a phenomenal player and he deserves to win and he deserves to be in the best position to win. But I wonder if Russell Wilson cooking and being in a different place is actually what's best for Russell Wilson. And if Russell Wilson has not just put this on himself. Because truthfully, I believe that a lot of this has to do with Russell Wilson. I believe a lot of this, the attitude that we've seen, the way he's changed outside of football, I do feel has something to do with this scenario. But I also feel that Pete Carroll getting up there in age and the lack of being able to change, or at least not to change and not to try to change, but just his inability to evolve. He just can't do it. He's just not young. He's not hip. He's not fresh, right? He doesn't have that outlook of football. And that's not a negative, right? Pete Carroll has had all this success of being the guy that he is. Why should he change? So maybe it is just a scenario. Maybe it is just a topic of we need to separate because we're different now. Like we don't agree with the philosophy that this team should go in, this direction. And if that's the case, then yes, they should trade Russell Wilson if they want to keep Pete Carroll. Otherwise, you should have maybe thought of getting rid of Pete Carroll because I would have kept the quarterback over the old head coach, especially a guy that's kind of been stagnant with the success of this team. There are a lot of questions here that I can't really answer, but I wanted to give you my opinion on this topic. I feel like Russell Wilson should stay in Seattle. But if those issues are deeper and really more deep-seated than we know, then maybe to be traded is the best solution. Now, what do I think Russell Wilson would go for? It would be very interesting. I think Dallas makes a lot of sense. Now, I don't think Dallas, from their perspective, would you rather have Dak or Wilson? To me, I'd rather have Dak because I see another 10 years in Dak. Even though he's not as good right now, I think he'll be better for the next 10 years than Russell Wilson. That just might be my opinion. From their perspective, if they feel they can win a Super Bowl within the next 3 years, then yeah, Wilson is the guy. Again, New Orleans, I'm not sure about. Chicago, I get it. Wilson listed them as a team. I don't even know how they'll work that out cap-wise. I feel like that would probably attract Allen Robinson to stay, or at least they could get another receiver in there. But I feel like they're a long ways away. I'd rather stay in Seattle there. The Raiders, I think, would be very interesting. I really see them as, if they are willing to make that move and give Derek Carr to Seattle, let's say, and maybe throw in 2 first-round picks. Derek Carr, 2 first-round picks for Russell Wilson. I think that could be the move that makes this thing happen. I think Russell Wilson's worth a ton. I think he's a great player. I think this past season was definitely worse than last year, and I think he hasn't gotten enough scrutiny this year than he really deserved. I felt like Russell Wilson kind of fell apart at the end of the year, and a lot of it had to do with his personal play, not the team around him. So Wilson is great, but Wilson does deserve blame, and so does Pete Carroll. It's a very fascinating situation, and it's one that I'll be keeping my eye out on for the rest of this offseason. It might actually impact the rest of this offseason and what actually happens, guys. So let me know in the comment section what you think. But I just wanted to go on this rant to air it out and to give you my thoughts. So thanks for watching. It's Mitch. Let me know what you think about this Wilson situation and this Pete Carroll situation. It's Mitch. Peace.